All right. Hi, everyone. I think we are live. Let us know if you can hear us in the comments. We are live with Eric and Martha Salitan. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hey,
Joe.
Joe.
It's been a long time since people have seen you on TV.
Yeah, you've aged.
Thank you. Thank you. You two haven't at all. Um, we were discussing a little bit, but has it been 10 years or when did you no longer when were you no longer on the show?
I believe it's been almost exactly 10 years.
Yeah, approximately 10 years.
That's wild that it's been over a decade. So I guess generally give everyone an update on what you've been up to.
Well, we're still living in rural Alaska, and we now have three sons, which is a really big part of our life and definitely a life changer. So we have Lucas, Sterling, and Victor. Um, and on top of that, Martha and I sold our business and our entity here now just over a year ago. And after 20 plus years of running our brand, Bushwhack Alaska, we, we're sort of semi retired and on to the next thing.
We're full-time family mode now.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Did how old are the kids? So three of them now. How old are they?
15, about to turn 5, and a little over 1.
Well, that must keep you pretty busy.
Yes, yes. 4 boys in the house and a dog.
I know when people were watching on the show, we started in Wiseman, where the viewers at least met you, and then on the show you would do summers, I think, or at least started off in Lake Iliamna. Can you, Eric, start talking about or how you got to that lodge, or maybe let's talk a little bit about your Alaskan journey, like how you got to Alaska and then how you got to where you are now.
Well, I mean, those are two different questions, Joe, but it's as far as being in Wiseman and then making our way up here, originally I just had a lodge in the Southern Brooks Range there in Wiseman. We sold that facility and that area there 5 years ago to another outfitter, and then we were full time down here in Iliamna, and that was really a focus on family as well. There is a public school here in the village of Iliamna, so our kids are. I mean, it might sound really remote and foreign to a lot of the viewers, life below zero, and people think of it as a different planet. But in just a little while, the school bus will pull right up on the small airstrip in front of my house and drop off our son. So the kids are able to go to school here. That was not an option in Wiseman. So 5 years ago, we started only operating here, and we operated two different lodges in southwestern Alaska. And then, like I was just saying, just over a year ago, Kip Fulks, the co-founder of Under Armour, he got in touch with us and made us an offer we couldn't refuse. And now we work kind of in conjunction with him at our leisure. And Kip's made a great neighbor and become a good friend. And I still guide with Kip and his partner Tim Winslow, and it's sort of a match made in heaven. I don't have all the responsibility riding on my shoulders every day, but at the same time, I get to guide hunters and enjoy all those things I do.
A lot of people might know and understand from the show what an outfitter is and a guide is. Could you explain that briefly?
So for the last 21 years, I've been a licensed guide here in the state of Alaska. Unlike a lot of other states, there's a fairly intricate process to become a licensed guide. You have to have a professional license here in Alaska to take hunters for compensation out to guide hunts. And that's what I've done for the majority of my livelihood.
But then, so from there, that's how you basically started to make a living in Alaska. You moved to Alaska, got a guide license, and took out hunters. How did you then end up in the lodge business?
Well, there was a lot in between those two big milestones. You know, when I first came to Alaska, I was a teenager and more or less a screw up and a young and wild person. And I kind of lived pretty hand to mouth for a lot of years. And Life Below Zero depicted sort of the tail end of that phase of life where it was very hand to mouth. And And as things evolved and I learned and realized I was learning, not knowing, and tried to pay attention, I was able to take advantage of the unbelievable opportunity that this state holds. There truly is almost unlimited opportunity here for people in Alaska if you're willing to wake up in the morning and put your boots on and work hard.
And Martha, what about you? What is your Alaskan journey? How did it start?
So I've spent majority of my time here in Iliamna. I'm here from Iliamna. Of course, spent some time with Erik up in the Brooks Range, and then I've lived out of state a little while too. But Iliamna has always been home and has always called to us. And I think just as Erik touched on, the natural progression of selling our business in the Brooks Range and coming here just made sense for us, and expanding our family and just kind of calling this our home front.
You were born in Iliamna?
So nobody's really born in rural Alaska. You have to go to where there's a hospital. So I'm from Iliamna, born in Anchorage.
So, but that you were raised in Iliamna, basically.
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And obviously you're Indigenous. Do you talk a little bit about your background and your family's roots in the area?
Yeah. So my mom moved here in her early 20s to work for an old Alaskan airline called Ween Air. She's actually originally from Nunivak Island, off the west coast of Alaska, and she just kind of like moved here for a job and really loved it here and met my dad, and so this became their home, and then eventually our home as well. So
And forgive my ignorance on these matters, like does that identify with a certain tribe, or is it both of your parents are different Indigenous?
my dad is actually German and my mom is Yupik.
Yupik. Okay. And so Yupiks aren't typically from Iliamna, right?
There's a mix here, so there are some Eskimos, some Yupiks here, and then there's also some Indians as well.
We have a show, Life Below Zero, Next Generation, and we had someone on the show named Joel Jacko who lives in Pedro Bay, Lake Iliamna. Do you ever run into him at the grocery store or anything?
I know Joel. I don't know him very well, and of course I know geographically where Pedro Bay is, just like I'm sure he knows where Iliamna is. And it's just up the lake from us, and we go and boat around the islands and up there pretty frequently. So I do know who Joel is, yes.
Give us a little bit of sense of the geography of what that actually means. So like how far, is it a boat, like an hour boat ride? Or I mean, the lake is fairly big, but it's not like, they're not next door neighbors.
No, no. Pedro Bay is, I don't know, 25 miles maybe away.
Yeah,
Roughly it is.
yeah.
That was a pretty accurate guess. About an hour boat ride. Lake Iliamna is Alaska's largest freshwater lake, so it's very, very big.
That's how much of your daily life is centered around the lake? Do you and growing up, is it something that with that, that body of water sort of is a central pool to everything that's going on in your life, or is it something that's just like you kind of look out and it's just beautiful, versus
I would say split that, and it's about 50-50. I mean, we get all of our salmon every year from the lake. It brings all the, like right now, all the migratory birds are coming back. And then, of course, we use it for travel during the winter time. So it's beautiful, but also it's
Useful.
useful. Yes.
Speaking of, how much of your life now, I know when we saw you first on the show, Erik, like I would say, well, you tell us, but a significant portion of your life was living off the land, getting your food, getting your water, those kinds of things. Has that changed, now that you're a successful businessman, you're married with 3 kids, are you still hunting for your family? How much of it, how much off the land are you living?
That's a really good question, and the answer is about the same. It's the reason that I choose to do that is I feel a very strong connection to the land. I feel that the meat, the fish, and the berries, and I go on and on of all the things that I feel there's unbelievable health benefits. And it's good soul food, if you will. It makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel good about where your food comes from. So although my life has continued to progress in business and subsistence may not be a fiscal demand of mine, I very much so still harvest all my own meat. We do not buy beef to this day. We do not buy pork to this day. We we hunt sheep and we hunt moose, and I still run a trap line every winter. And the really neat part about that is that my sons are coming with me now. So my eldest son, Lucas, who's 15, he was actually recently recognized by the local Native corporation for being a next generation person who's carrying out the traditional ways. And they purchased some furs from Lucas directly and displayed them in their company store. And they put up photographs and different information about the fur-bearing species he harvests, their scientific name, their Yupik name. And I think that's really cool that that's something that I've been able to share with him. And Victor, even though he's only about 5 years old, he still kicks around on the back of snowmobiles and around on the floor of boats. And he was just with Lucas and I here yesterday, running in a skiff in a snowstorm, hunting ducks in the spring. And no, we're really still very much at it. I don't actually have an interest in ever leaving that connection.
Martha, did you grow up in that kind of style, or in terms of living off the land and that as well?
Very much so. And I think that is why we're so drawn to the area here, is because we have the ability and the resources. And I mean, you just we walk out our back door and we do it. But yes, I grew up putting the net out, going moose hunting with my mom, picking berries in the summer. Yeah.
How important is it for you guys to teach your kids in those, not just traditional ways? I don't mean like, indigenous tradition, but just generally living off the land. How important is it to pass down those traditions?
I think a lot of it just has to do with respect and ethics. And, the Native people, they have traditional ways that are very important to them, but they don't have exclusivity on that. As a white guy, I respect the land too, and I value the land and I value the land's resources. I think there's a lot that can be learned out on the country that can apply to life, even down in a place like Los Angeles where you live, Joe. I took my son Lucas this past fall on his first sheep hunt where he was the shooter. He didn't know that he was going to be the shooter until we got right on a ram, and he harvested his first sheep. And there were several points during that hunt when it was pretty tough. And this was a tough hunt even by sheep hunting standards. And I really believe that he learned on that hunt, when he overcame different obstacles like death, like where you're actually scared you're going to die type stuff, I think that gave him good perspective in life, where other kids that don't have that perspective and they run into an obstacle and it seems so inhibitive and that they can't overcome it. I really think that I instilled something in my son that he can carry forward into any field or any forum.
That's awesome. Did you have that kind of upbringing at all growing up? We're getting a question of where were you born? Were you born in the city or the woods, or is that something that you had growing up?
I was born in rural upstate New York, and I grew up in the Finger Lakes region, hunting and fishing. And I was obsessive about hunting and fishing. Hunting and fishing in the outdoors has been, I only ever wanted to be two things in life, Joe. And the first one was a Major League Baseball player. And then that didn't work out. So at 11, I had sort of like the scope say, okay, this isn't going to happen. So I need a new goal. So then I decided that I wanted to be a professional hunter. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even understand that there was an entire industry around outfitting and hunt guiding, or I had no concept of that, but I knew that I was passionate about hunting and the outdoors. And I've basically measured success ever since then by how much time I get to spend outdoors, enjoying nature, hunting, fishing, trapping, climbing mountains, looking at pretty things.
So you knew from as far back as you can remember? Like you wanted to be out, you were an outdoor.
Yeah, that's the whole, and I don't know, I don't know. You have, I think you have kids too now as well, and a lot of people have kids. I don't know what to like. Kids don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and I don't know how to like cope with that. I feel like they should know like definitively what they want to be and have like direction. And I mean, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I don't know if that's because I'm a crazy person or because I got lucky or because I was smart about that. I don't know why that is, but it seems difficult for a lot of young people today.
And how did you make that? I mean, you knew obviously you wanted to be someone who makes a living from hunting and guiding. You knew you loved the outdoors. Is that the call of Alaska? Like, how did you end up, and why did you end up going? Did you just move there, or did you go visit first, or talk a little bit about that?
I mean, Joe, this is our first date in 10 years. I mean, I generally don't kiss on the first date, but I mean, if you want to go down this road, it's I was a wild kid. I was somewhat of a juvenile delinquent. I had a lot of detentions in school. I was kind of bad, but at the same time, I was a hard worker. And all that I knew about Alaska was that Alaska was a place of unlimited outdoor opportunity for hunting, fishing, trapping. I mean, the state's motto is the last frontier. And I also was under the impression that there was very few rules there. And I was not very into rules as a teenager. So that's what attracted me. I drove from upstate New York, not far from the Quebec border where I'm from, to Alaska in a beater early 90s Toyota pickup. And it was a big adventure. I remember coming up the Alaskan and seeing caribou crossing the road for the first time and grizzly bears and all kinds of wildlife. And there was one experience in particular I recall where I saw a bear on the side of the road and it was eating grass. It was springtime, May, when I came, and I pulled the truck over and I was watching the bear. The bear walked right up to my truck and it put its paws on the cow pusher on the front of the truck and looked at me. And then it dropped down and it walked across the road. And I got such a kick out of that. I thought that was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen, that I'd laughed like a schoolgirl for the next 100 miles.
Huh. How did you end up did you start your time in Wiseman? I think, like you said, it's been a while, but I think if I do recall, you lived in Fairbanks for a while, maybe drove a cab, something like that, before you got out into Wiseman.
You're really playing dirty now. I actually, to keep it a little more above board, I did attend the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I went to college for wildlife biology. I did drive a cab at night. I also worked at a funeral home at night, which was another weird job that I had. Yeah, ultimately, through a number of different, just by chance encounters and coincidences and meeting different people, I'd ended up doing some trapping in the Brooks Range. And I was like 19 years old at that point, and I remember saying something like very serious, like, I'm not going back to Fairbanks till I figured life out. And of course, at the end of trapping season, I had not figured life out. So then I just stayed up there for, I don't know, I think it was about 10 years.
Sorry about my cough. Still recovering. In that time, so you found that area to be because Alaska's huge, right? And I'm fascinated by where everyone ends up. But the Brooks Range, is it because it had abundance of wildlife?
There was nothing that thoughtful that went into it. It was merely the fact that a set of coincidences pushed me in that direction. I had no idea that the Southern Brooks Range is one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen in the whole world, or the beauty of the remoteness or anything about the country. I simply went there because I got an opportunity to go there. And that is an interesting thing about people who come to Alaska. Like Martha's father, who's been in Alaska for over 40 years, he's only ever lived here. And that, I think about sometimes his experience of Alaska and mine, his perspective has to be very different because he has only lived in this place where I got to move around and see a lot of different things before I settled here.
It is pretty unique, obviously, for such a large state with a smallish population that there is such a diversity of experiences and just in terms of where you're living could change everything, your perspective. You mentioned that you went to school for wildlife management. I don't think a lot of people probably know that from watching the show. Is that like a hunting degree, or what does that mean?
I got a degree in conservation natural resources, and then I pursued a second degree in wildlife biology. No, it's a degree in science, the biology of wildlife, and I majored in mammalogy, and I had an interest in large predators. I did a bunch of work in college with different scientific programs, collar programs, and throughout the entirety of my career, I've kept a pinky toe in that, and have worked on a number of other collar projects, and that's something that I'm still interested in and still participating in to this day. So I think that having a strong understanding of wildlife, not just as an individual animal, but as an ecosystem as a whole, I think that that's a very important perspective to hold, and something that I value and think about a lot.
That's it's really interesting because obviously on the show does a lot of editing, as you both are well aware, and cuts out a lot of stuff, right? We focus a lot on the more action oriented, the hunting aspects. So people might have seen you do a ton of harvesting or hunting, but there's a lot more to your relationship with animals. You mentioned collaring. Like, talk a little bit about that and just generally your relationship to animals outside of eating them.
Well, I think a lot of people, to say something positive about the show Life Below Zero, I think that Life Below Zero was able to show a segment of the population of the world, because of course it aired in many different countries, about a life in a place that many people can't even imagine. And within that group, there's many people that hunting and the harvest of wildlife is very foreign. I think what's important that you're sort of inging towards is that just because in certain situations, myself, Martha, my family, we harvest animals with almost a ruthless efficiency at times, um, that doesn't mean that we don't have compassion for the animals or that we don't care about the animals. They're a carefully managed resource. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game is one of the top institutions in the whole country, and the science that they perpetrate is fantastic. Everything is harvested within legal limits and within seasons that are created and designed to preserve these animals and their continuation. And there's a ton of science and projects that go into it all the time. Like you mentioned, I've worked on several different collar projects. I've captured bears, mountain lions, jaguars, all different kinds of things that I've gotten to do hunts that are green, if you will. And for me, it's really neat to get out and participate in this stuff. For one, I always get to learn something. And I believe that every day I can learn something is a day well spent. So it's a really neat thing. I've got to work with a lot of talented people and help out, and it's something that I've really enjoyed.
That's great. We're getting some questions. A lot of people are saying you two look great. I've been wondering about you guys. One of the questions they're asking, and I think I don't know if I should ask you both or just let Martha answer, but how'd you guys meet?
We met quite a few years ago out here in Iliamna. Eric's been guiding out here for a very long time, and he was working as a brown bear guide out here. And yeah, that's kind of where our story starts. He would come over to visit my brother.
Like, oh, is Martha around kind of situation?
Um,
You
yeah,
guys, and then you said you guys have been together now for, well, since the show, right? I mean, it's been 10 years. And
and yep, 10 years.
what was your first impression of Eric?
Similar to now, long, skinny, witty, charismatic, outdoorsy guy.
That sounds accurate. That sounds good to me.
I was just bracing.
I was ready. Yeah, ready. I was ready to. And
What was your, hold on, Joe. What was your first impression of me, Eric?
Hot.
I was afraid to ask that one, but I'm glad you did. I'm glad I'm glad you did. Um, Eric, did you find so you're traveling and working into Lake Iliamna somewhat as an outsider, especially 10 years ago, right? Like, did you find the community welcoming to you, or are you sort of, a random guy coming in, or what was the initial vibe? Because now you are a local, you have roots, you have kids, you're there. But initially, what was the feeling from the community?
You mean as a community member or as a business owner? And it does supersede 10 years.
Yeah, I guess
I've
generally in terms of going into a place where you are not born into.
I mean, there's for the weak of heart, it certainly could be a bit intimidating to come into this rural village or a lot of other rural villages. But that being said, Iliamna, although it has its characters, is actually a very friendly village. There's great people here. Um, I've been fortunate to travel all across Alaska, and there's some villages, some even that were featured on your program, Joe, that are pretty rough. And Iliamna's awesome. We have a great school here. There's a lot of teachers that are really passionate about kids and learning, and there's a sense of community here. Not to bring a dark shadow on the conversation, but there was some deaths in the community recently. I saw virtually every member of this community, as well as many other people from surrounding communities, travel here, participate in the potluck dinner, bring food, everybody come together to support the bereaved. And I think that says a lot about the sort of soul of the community. So yeah, there's some people that have given me a ration here or there, but for the most part, people here have been very good to me.
I found my time there. I think I visited twice, maybe three times to be lovely. Obviously, I stayed at your lodge, so I got the I got a wonderful welcome. So you mentioned early on that you sold the lodges. Do you still live? Are you living in the lodge? Where are we seeing you guys?
So we sold the lodge. The conversation, although Kip Falks was the purchaser, and most people know Kip for his work with Under Armour, Tim Winslow, who is a 14-year employee of mine, he also is the godfather of my middle son, Victor, and a great friend and somebody who I trust immensely. He actually is he took the reins from me. So Tim has taken over my job, and he is the outfitter now. He has the federal areas that I once held, the federal hunting concessions, and I told Tim, that it would be a pretty easy transition because all the employees liked him better than me anyway. And really, the only roles that we've now changed is he was always mom and I was always dad, or he was always good cop, I was always bad cop. And now I'm good cop and he's bad cop because he's the boss, and it's really his problem at the end of the day. But Tim and Kip, they're really a partnership that couldn't be better. They really complement each other's strengths, and they're trucking along. And they even let me. I applied to be like a packer or a dishwasher. They let me kind of come over. If Martha's mad at me, they'll let me have some scraps there in the dining room. And
You'll get a 5% discount on a room, maybe on some food. They'll let you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You mentioned Wiseman. You mentioned traveling across. Do you guys see yourselves? You have obviously three kids now, but staying in Iliamna, or do you see yourself ever like living somewhere else, or what does the future hold?
You want to answer? Or you want me to?
That's an ever-evolving plan. I feel like we definitely have our roots here, and we probably always will, because we love it here, and for the reasons that we spoke about, just that we're so connected to the people and the land, and it's life is really good to us here. But we have played around with the thought of moving elsewhere, possibly internationally, and just letting our kids experience life outside of Iliamna. We feel like would be really good for them. They kind of got a taste of that working and being at the lodge with us, and I feel like that's really good for kids who only have like a kind of a microscopic view here, just to kind of broaden their perspective. So yeah, for mostly for our kids, we've talked about that, but also we would love to travel and go elsewhere. So
I completely agree with what Martha said, and that's for the children and sort of to broaden their worldview. We have discussed if we would do like a 6 months abroad thing or something, but we're actually building a new facility this summer here in Iliamna, so we're by no means pulling out. We're going to have a really cool new place here coming up this coming year, and I think that this will probably be home base forever. Um, if we go and have other experiences for limited amounts of time or not, only time will tell. Martha and I have both been pretty fortunate. We've gotten to travel a lot over the last few years, so that's been rewarding.
And Martha, you mentioned that you lived elsewhere. Where did you move to, like LA, Anchorage? Have you lived in the lower 48?
I lived in Nevada for a short while, and then I also went to high school in Fresno for a short while. Those were my two little stints outside of Alaska.
Is there any chance I mean, cut to a couple years, you guys are living in like downtown Los Angeles or Manhattan. Do you ever imagine? Yeah.
If you offered us like the most fancy, I wouldn't do it.
Our kids are too feral.
But that is obviously a conscious choice to not live in the cities. Obviously, cities are for some people; they're not for everything. I guess and Martha, this is to you. Like, what do you find in terms of value for your family and kids
Right.
living in the wild?
There's pros and cons to living here, and definitely the pros are our kids are, like I said, feral. They're like wild and free, and they get a lot of life lessons that Eric was talking about. You go through different hardships out here. Things don't come as easy, which is really great. You learn to work for what you have, but there's also like we would love for our kids to have access to different programs and things outside of our little school here, which is they're doing the best they can for the funding that they have. But there's big pros and cons, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons for us here, which is why we choose to stay, and we make the best with the hand that we're dealt with what we have. So
That's awesome. And then we're getting a question about the area. Someone's asking if you guys built the house that you're in, or do you buy an existing place? And that's a great question, which is how much building, we saw you building on the show. How much building do you do? Or is a lot of infrastructure is probably there, right?
Since we've been on the show, we've built many thousands and thousands of square feet of lodges and done a lot of building.
Is that something you kind of I've noticed that there's a lot of people, particularly on the show, and who have I don't know what the right word is, green thumb. That's not the right word. That's gardening. But have the ability to build. Is that something you just learn? Like when you moved out there, could you build a cabin, or is it like you start to build, a lean-to, and then you build a cabin. You sort of now you're building lodges. How has your carpentry skills evolved over time?
Yeah, they evolved, but at this point, the scale of the buildings we're building, I just act as a general foreman. I'm not swinging a hammer a lot, Joe. Kind of like you're not filming every Life Below Zero episode yourself.
Indeed. But when you first move there, I mean, you're cutting your own wood, right? There's all the outdoorsy stuff. You're doing it yourself.
I remember being a teenager and living in the worst kind of like ramshackle, tarped up cabins and terrible eating like squirrels and beef. It was not easy.
Let's talk a little bit about those early days. I do remember, um, how did you end up on the show? Because my memory is somebody landed near you and you came out with a gun and said, "What are you guys doing here?"
Easy with the gun.
I like
Okay.
how you
No,
said
there's no
near.
gun.
I like how you said near him.
That's it's been like it's been a myth over the years, but basically no one how did you end up on the show?
The way I ended up on the show is that you had a scouting plane, and it was Tim Pastor personally, and then there was some of the cast of that television program Flying Wild. I believe it was a guy named Luke Hickerson.
Yep.
Then what was the other guy's name? The kind of wild guy.
I don't know if he was wild, but Luke and Ponch, right?
Yeah, Ponch, the wild
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
You landed, and what happened?
well, I just went and asked them what their intentions were. They had come during sheep season, and tension might have been a little high that month, and I just asked them what they were up to.
And they were like, "Holy shit, we love your attitude. Let's put you on the show."
No, they said that after a while, but they had come to see like another guy that lived further up the river,
Yeah.
and I directed them to the other guy, but then he didn't want to participate.
That's were you I don't say nervous, but what were your thoughts when you first went on the show? Were you worried about how would be portrayed and did you have any experience watching typical Alaska TV?
I mean,
That was a loaded question, Joe.
I know that was a lot of questions. Let me make it more focused, which is did you enjoy your experience on the show?
no, I did not. I've had a lot of jobs, some of which I've mentioned right in this interview, that I worked at a funeral home. I drove a cab. I once worked at an exotic animal ranch where my job was to shovel exotic shit. Despite all those jobs, Life Below Zero is still my least favorite job I have ever had. That being said, I always have fun, and there's some people that I got to meet through the show that worked for you that were really fantastic people, and we made the best of our time. But yeah, that TV work is tough, Joe. Down there in LA.
You do get that a lot in terms of a variety of things that being filmed is difficult. It's definitely a challenge and it can be really annoying. I mean, what did you find, without Eric, what was that, whatever. What did you find the most challenging aspects of being on the show?
Well, I think that producers, that's like a very inappropriate title for what their job is. What they actually are is trained manipulators. That's what a producer actually is. And producers are very, very intelligent people. And they have ways of leading you and asking you certain questions. And I just, without going too far into it, Joe, I mean,
Thank you for that.
You know me from the program, and you know me outside of the program and our telephone calls, and you can see I have you're not going to play me. Don't play me. I don't want to be played. So
there is obviously everyone out there has a different job and a different reason to be out there, and they're making a TV show ultimately, and it is interesting and has been one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of people who are on the show actively have left situations where they have to answer to people or they have to, and
yeah, and the other thing about it, and I'll make this statement loosely because the rest of the talent on the program, their financial circumstance is not my business, nor do I have any direct knowledge of their financial circumstance. But it was my impression at the time that Martha and I were the only people whom were not making the majority of their livelihood from the show. That's a game changer.
In terms of your ability or the crew's ability, cast ability to
Just facts.
to deal with the challenges of being on the show.
If that's your only way to make a living is to be on the show, if that's the only way that you can get money, you're going to take a lot more nonsense than if that represents a relative small part of your livelihood.
It makes total sense, like for anything, right? You just got to determine whatever you're doing, is it worth it? And at some point for you, or pretty quickly, it became not worth it, basically.
It wasn't anymore, and like you and I spoke when you reached out to Martha and I for this, I always enjoyed your candor, and I always enjoyed, just speaking with you. But the sort of grind that is television, and I think a lot of the viewers probably super interested. They don't realize how hard it is to make TV. Making TV is not. It's not. You don't just walk around and wave, and it's long hours. It's detailed. It's tough work. It really is. And if your heart isn't in it, like anything, then it quickly becomes not worth it.
And Martha, what about you? What was your experience being on the show? And
I, of course, was thinking about, I knew you were going to ask me. I felt like it was incredibly intrusive. And I guess my metaphor is like if you're using the bathroom and somebody keeps knocking and saying, "How's it going in there? How are you doing? Tell me about your experience." And you're like, "No, go away. Go away. I'm using the bathroom. Wait your turn." It was incredibly daunting in the beginning. And I was, of course, extremely nervous. And I would fumble and stumble over my words, and then just kind of naturally progress into becoming a little bit more used to being around all the cameras and mic'd up, and just kind of having this little entourage that followed us around everywhere we went. I would chalk it up to the same as what Erik said. It was just not for the two of us, although we did appreciate it for what it was.
And do you guys get recognized, or do you get questions from fans, Erik?
He gets recognized everywhere he goes, but the strangest thing is that he doesn't get recognized by his looks. People recognize his voice.
I think that means I talk funny.
I guess people are used to in the context, and once they hear your voice, that it kind of puts it in context. On the show, you talked a little bit about flying. Do you still get a chance to fly at all?
I sold my airplane when we sold our lodges, and we sold. Gosh, they came and bought just about everything. I offered them even the dog and a couple of the children in the deal if they do that. But no, I just sold my Super Cub. It's the first time I haven't had an airplane since I was like 23 years old or something.
So is that something when you were in Alaska, when you were guiding, you obviously have to get a license. Did you always want to be a pilot? Did you fly at all before?
To be honest with you, I never wanted to be a pilot, and I still don't want to be a pilot. And I never really was much of a pilot. The only reason that I had an airplane and I flew an airplane is just because it was so conducive to what I did. But to give credit to the people that deserve it, I was always surrounded by pilots that were 1,000 times more talented than me, braver than me, and they always took the brunt of the work. But to have an extra airplane in camp was always a really great safety net, even for those guys, because if they had an issue out there, I could airdrop a part. I could come in. There was a spare plane in camp, and that really worked out. So it's a really awesome thing, and I really respect the guys that do it. But to be a really talented, bush pilot, that has to be what you do all the time. That has to be your whole life. When you go to sleep at night and you close your little peepers, you need to be thinking about airplanes. And when you wake up, you're thinking about airplanes. All I care about an airplane is to take me from point A to point B. And so for that reason, I never reached any high level. Martha, on the other hand, loves flying airplanes, got her student's pilot's license, and frightens me to no end when she soloed. So
Are you flying now, Martha? Do you fly?
No, I have a strong desire to get my private pilot's license, but when Eric went and got his float rating down in Florida, I just kind of dabbled in it a little bit and soloed. And then we had a few more children, and that kind of dream of flying kind of came behind the priorities. No, the pilot in the family is my brother. He's the pilot.
Is he a bush pilot? Does he travel? Does he do make his living from doing that?
He was a helicopter pilot in Alaska for a number of years and just recently moved down to fly for American Airlines. So,
That's great. Do you guys do you have a lot of family still in Alaska or Iliamna or
so my father lives here in Iliamna, and then Eric's mom recently moved up and she lives here with us. But outside of that, no.
Nobody loves us.
but you have a lot of family, you have a lot of love uh um out there. Let me see some of the other questions we're getting. I don't know if this is I want to talk about political or politics, but someone's asking about and obviously feel free to not have a comment or have a comment. Any thoughts on Pebble Mine?
No comment.
I thought that might be the case.
The thing about Pebble Mine is that it's such an incendiary issue that if I answer that question, even in a neutral way, and I give any kind of answer about that, there's people right here in this community that one of them wants to shoot me then, and then the other one wants to work with me, and it's just a really tough subject. But
Well, let's go.
I
I was say, well, let's go to a much easier subject that we're getting asked, which is about your favorite foods. When you are traveling.
how did we just make that transition? You went from like the ultimate faux pas subject to like something so easy, Joe.
Well, that's what I say. It's a great transition from non-political to, or maybe it's the same. Maybe you list your food and there's people who want to shoot you because your favorite food is not their favorite food. So maybe it could be just as divisive. But are there foods that you miss when you're not there? I assume obviously salmon and that, local foods.
You want to go? Or?
I mean, we eat all of we eat moose, we eat salmon, we eat sheep, berries, yes, we definitely miss all of that. But to say what our favorite is,
sheep.
Yeah, Eric's is sheep.
Is it the taste, Eric, or is it the harvesting of it? Or both?
Both.
Yeah.
But it's the greatest thing in the world.
Because you can appreciate what went in to getting it, or you're saying it actually tastes
both.
Okay.
Both. Which is a wonderful coincidence, but it's just such a sweet taste.
Martha, what about you?
I'm gonna just say moose. I love moose. I love it just because we cook it so many different ways. So yeah, it's an easy one for me.
So vanilla.
Since we're bouncing back and forth between sensitive and non-sensitive topics, we don't need to necessarily talk about climate change or anything but I am curious, have you guys seen, probably more for Martha, but Eric, you've lived there now too, changes to the environment, changes in terms of, one of the biggest things we've seen over the last 10 years are fish restrictions. A lot of Native people have talked about how, their way of life in terms of fish particularly has been challenging. Do you see that challenge? Are you still getting those challenges?
I think you're fishing, Joe.
I think there are different ways to gauge things, and I feel like for instance, this year the lake didn't really freeze. And of course, that's a big topic for everybody. So they all talk about, well, when was the last time the lake didn't freeze? And there's a variety of answers. Well, it was this many years ago and that many years ago. And it's happened a few times. And also, we didn't have a great snow year. So there's you can gauge it by the animals or the fish or by snow or how cold the winter gets or how hot it gets or how many wildfires you get. So I'm going to say it definitely felt different this winter, to be very vague. We didn't really have like a real winter this year, which makes it hard for a variety of different reasons, traveling on the lake, and you can't use your snow machine, and it really kind of changes what you can do. But I'll let Eric kind of answer to your question too.
You know, it's another hot button topic. I mean, it seems like things are changing, like it's getting warmer, but at the same time, how long is the human lifespan, and what is the perspective of that? Is that, you know, I mean, there's been ice ages and all kinds of things. I don't have the answer, and I won't pretend to have the answer. All that I will say, though, and you mentioned the fisheries that are struggling here in Alaska, you got to keep in mind that those are localized problems. Here in Bristol Bay, we've had, I think, for the last 6 years in a row, the all-time record salmon run since they started keeping records. So why that is, if a warmer trend helps sockeye salmon that are here in Bristol Bay and it hurts king salmon stocks and other drainages or chum salmon, I'm not going to pretend to, you can ask an ichthyologist that question. But it's, those things are localized. Like here, again, it's been a record run in Bristol Bay.
It kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, where how every place in Alaska is so vast, wide, and diverse that it's, you know, people are like, what's it like in Alaska? Whereas everything is hyper localized. There may
Yeah,
be issues in one place and not in the other.
yeah. There's not a generalization for the whole state.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, and I wouldn't pretend to, but I am observant, and you know, you see different things change. You know, when I first came here and when Martha was young, there was hundreds of thousands of caribou running around Iliamna.
That's one of the questions here.
And today, you barely see caribou. They're only in little small pockets, and
there's no season.
And there's no season either now, hunting season, and that goes for subsistence or for sport hunting. Does that mean something bad happened? I don't know. Maybe things are changing. There's a lot more moose than there used to be.
That's one of the things that I've loved exploring over the years on the show, is not diving into the divisive politics of it all, but just talking into what people are seeing in their backyard, right? Like what's happening, what's not happening. The why is, like you say, somebody else's question, but it is interesting to just see those changes. So we have, like, it looks like a couple more minutes. So I'll go through, see if there's any follow-up questions. I think I've got to most of them. Oh, do you ever get a chance to go back up to Wiseman, Erik or Martha?
You know, I haven't been up there in, I guess, 5 years. Still do own land there. But, I sold my lodge and my hangar, and
It sounds like you both are at a great spot. You know, a big part of what this is where they are, you know, where are they now? Don't Google yourself, but if you know, you're like, oh, where's Erik now? Where are Erik and Martha now? There's like all these like random videos, same with like Glenn or anybody who's been on the show, that like AI makes. And they make usually like no sense. So by the way, that's for a lot of people who watch a lot of those videos, know that we are not making those. We don't know where they come from. But the point is, where you are now is, it sounds like you're in a great spot. You're thriving and sort of open to the next thing.
you're 100% right, Joe. We're in an awesome place. Things I'm really grateful for. sort of in this transition into another phase of life is the 3 amazing sons that Martha gave me, my wife, who I love just as much or more than the day I married her, and I mean that, even though that's sappy to say on TV. Our friendship, our partnership, and also to our health. It's awesome not to be like a workaholic right now, and I'm 41, and Martha will be 40 in an amount of time that I will not say out loud.
15 years.
No, not 15. But we work, we both run. We work on our health. Martha's run some half marathons. We're in an awesome place.
Do you agree, Martha? Feeling good about life?
Definitely. I think last year was our transition year, just kind of getting used to not running the lodge and all the stress and scheduling and everything that comes with that, and kind of leading a slower life and being able to really enjoy everything that we get to do out here. And like Eric said, focus on our health and our family, and yeah.
That's great. We got our just 2 last follow-up questions. And people are asking, is the volcano near you guys, the one we're hearing in the news about possibly erupting? And
Yes.
what could that impact, or how might that impact you guys?
Depends on which direction the wind blows.
If it blows to you guys, what is that? Do you have to be prepared for that? What is that? I know very little about that.
The biggest thing is it's the one thing that truly shuts down air travel. So nobody would be coming in or out if there was a heavy ash cloud. And that has happened in my time here, where we had ash fall here from a volcano, and it did shut down air travel, but just for a very short period.
And then the last question we're getting, or we'll make it the last question, is if somebody wanted to experience Alaska, or I know you guys actively are not, or I should say, are not very active on social media, but is there a way if someone wanted to come out to the lodge? Is there, what should they search, or just generally Iliamna if they wanted to visit the area they've seen on TV?
We're still working with the lodge and participating with the lodge. And I'm still guiding hunters, both with the lodge and independently. We just don't do it on the scale that we once did. The commercial machine is shut down, and now we're just in a really enjoyable sort of phase here. But they'd be welcome to email Martha or I on our business email. You wanted to give that, or the Apex?
Office manager at theapexalaska.com.
And people can find out more information about Iliamna and the lodge and that kind of stuff. Well,
my email.
Erik at theapexalaska.com.
And I wish we could put it up on the screen, like call now. But the good news is like you mentioned at the very beginning of this call, Erica, and obviously I reached out to you to do this, but both you and Martha, it's been a long time. And I know, as mentioned, there were some challenges being on the show. But fans got to know you over the years, and people enjoyed watching you both. And it's really, truly, like, really great to see you both doing really well and at such a wonderful and fulfilled place in your life.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
So thank you.
You as well.
Oh, thank you. And thank you both for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I know fans were excited to see where are they now. So we'll be doing more of these probably in the future. But thanks everyone for watching, and thank you both for doing this.
Hey, have an awesome day.
It says